From KAMR Local 4 News, your local election headquarters, this is Politics Today.
Do you think when it comes to Hyde Kelly, the council has been good stewards of taxpayer money?
I do not.
Coming up, concerns are being raised by one council member over the use of taxpayer money for outside legal counsel. We'll tell you why Les Simpson wants to revisit the city's agreement with attorney George Hyde's law firm during the next council meeting. And lawmakers in Austin putting out the House and Senate versions of the state budget. We'll take a look at what the priorities are down in Austin. Emerald City Council expected to discuss their agreement with Hyde Kelly LLC during Tuesday's City Council meeting. Thanks for joining us this morning. We have a lot to break down, so buckle up. The item to be discussed during Tuesday's meeting was put on the agenda by Councilman Les Simpson. Just to look back on the history of this agreement, last year Emerald City Council entered into an agreement with their outside counsel, George Hyde and his firm, Hyde Kelly LLC, during the previous budget for $95,000. When council approved the current budget back in September, another $250,000 was allocated to be used for services from Hyde LLC. In total, the city has spent about $180,000 of that $345,000 that was approved. We have the expense records that range from June to October of last year. Those records cover how $146,000 of those tax dollars were spent. The City Council has had a number of big issues that they've consulted George Hyde's firm on, such as the AEDC, the city charter, the Sanctuary City for the Unborn Ordinance. However, back during the December 10th meeting, concerns were raised by two council members, Les Simpson and Don Tips, about how some of the other tax dollars were being spent.
Again, we're in uncharted territory. This has not happened before, of a council hiring its own attorney. I mean, the tricky part gets in, we can only function and operate as a group of five. He's representing the council. But what happens is there are things that are being referred to him that I don't even know what it is. It's kind of hard for us to work together if we're dealing with issues that all of us don't know about, or if there's something to know about. If I've got to get advice or find out what's going on, an advantage of having it through Grayson is the ability, if he's, not to say, he's not impeding our power, but he's a focal point to help keep all of us informed about what's going on. At this point, with each of us individually having to contact him, we get charged every time we go for legal advice, and I don't know the legal advice he's giving the others. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's why a central focal point of just keeping all of us informed about what the issues are, what the advice is, as well as being able to watch the expenses to help us operate more efficiently and effectively. Again, the problem that we've gotten into is just, it's tricky because we are not all five agreeing to what we're sending to him. We're doing it individually. But I don't see how we can make these decisions as if he's representing all of council, that individually we can ask him to work on whatever we work on, because there's no check and balance on how much are we getting charged, what we're sending down there, how that's working.
So I would agree having an attorney on call is great, but I also think that it can be abused. And like you said, the power, I'm not trying to usurp the power up here, but I'm trying to be a good steward to say I don't get to just do what I want to do. Now, I agree we've all approved the resolution, and I understand that, and that's great. So maybe to your point of we just got to develop maybe better protocols, because I think it's an issue of there's lots of times I can just pick up and ask him questions. And I just don't think that that's being a great steward. I mean, we see the bills that come through. It is a lot of money.
And then where is the final accountability on how much we're spending to make sure that we don't overspend?
That's your budget.
But who's keeping track of that?
You are. You're approving the bills as they come in. They have to be approved by all council members.
So if I go to someone else, then it comes back to all council members.
Well, we all would need to approve it. So I like the protocol that we have is I can't approve Hyde Kelly's bill. So Hyde Kelly sends the bill to myself and city manager. City manager sends it to all of y'all and says, please review this. Let us know if you had concerns. You had concerns on the last bill. He's getting those clarified. And then if you approve it, then he gets paid.
What if we don't approve it?
I'm not
Not gonna
sure.
pay?
I didn't get that far. He's an attorney, so I don't know.
So we're kind of approving it after the fact.
Well, no, I'm just saying, you signed a contract with a guy, he's performed, and then I think the issue of approval is it's awareness more than anything.
We told you there's a lot to digest. That was just from that meeting that happened back on December 10th. Keep in mind that the city does have a city attorney. As we head into Tuesday's meeting, Politics Today producer Devin Singleton has spoken to both Mayor Cole Stanley and Councilman Les Simpson about the city's relationship with this outside attorney firm, the George Hyde firm. Here's what they had to say before Tuesday's agenda item to discuss that agreement. Take a listen.
I'd like to say that with Councilmember Simpson and his agenda request to put the resolution, which is the form that we hired the Hyde Kelly firm on, to put it up for termination is exactly the right form. So if council feels like, hey, we're not being a good steward, or I don't like that you're using an expert, that's better than my other guy, or, even if it was just, political jockeying, then what you're talking about there is the right method. So anytime council comes together and 3 of those 5 say, yes, we want this, or yes, we want to remove this, that's the right way to go. And so I look forward to the vote. I think that we definitely will keep him. I think that the vote will go in favor of not terminating that agreement because he has been very, very useful to this council. It would be a mistake towards government bureaucracy if we don't allow council to have representation, because then we would be saying it's not just lawyers, it's an accounting firm, it's an audit firm, it could be a medical advisory issue. You don't have to look very far to see how out of bounds things can get when they come down from just governmental guidelines that nobody questions. We have to be willing to question ourselves.
Because I think if we can come to some consensus on the resolution of how we have outside counsel, I think that would take care of the problems that we're dealing with. We've already spent about $188,000 so far. That money's spent. We can't go back and get it. There's nothing that we can do. But I do think by putting this resolution into place, we can be much more responsible to the taxpayers and transparent about what we're using their money for to hire outside counsel. The way the process is currently set up under the resolution, it doesn't meet the standard of transparency which this council has really expected. The resolution that's being put forward will bring back that transparency. And so I think that is what we should be focusing on and should look to pass that. It will provide clarity on exactly how to handle this going forward, and it will be much more transparent, and it will allow us to make much more effective use of taxpayer money. I would just go look at the bills to do a litmus test on the transparency.
And we've done that for you. The City Council has worked with Attorney George Hyde on a number of issues over the past year. Coming up, we'll take a deeper look at how money was being spent for services from Hyde's law firm between June and October. All right, we're back to that subject. So we've been looking through those documents for a while now, and as we continue to sort through and organize the expenses from June to October, here's how some of that money was spent. Take a look. 46% of the $146,000 was spent on large items, like the AEDC, the city charter, and Sanctuary City, most of which were discussed publicly during council meetings. However, how the other half of that money was spent is part of the issue at hand. Both the mayor and Councilman Simpson say this is about good stewardship of taxpayer dollars. You heard them say that in the last segment. Both the mayor and Councilman Simpson told us that the issue at hand is, again, being good with that money. Take a listen.
Do you think when it comes to Hyde Kelly, the council has been good stewards of taxpayer money?
I do not. I think we spent money to duplicate things that have already been done by the city or could be done by the city. It is much more expensive to hire outside counsel than to do things internally. And there are cases where we could have gotten the work done at a lesser cost or at no cost at all. So in this case, I don't think we've been good stewards of the taxpayer money, and I think it's our obligation to put a stop to this and to put forth and pass a resolution that brings a level of transparency and fiscal responsibility to the level that this council has stood for, and that the public expects.
So even when the guy wasn't necessarily plugging himself in, this council saw fit to go ahead and utilize that resource as a second set of eyes, because of what we were doing was all very critical. And you had to get it right. So every dollar we've spent has been money well spent in the way in which we got what we paid for. So we haven't wasted anything. The question would be, could you have gotten what you needed without spending those monies? And quite frankly, during that season of time, no. I have no problem defending the fact that the monies that we've spent with him, be it right now $187,000 of that $345,000 budget, have all been monies well spent, and I have a return on that investment.
Large items like ADC and charter make up only half of the money that was spent with that law firm. Coming up next, we'll take a look at how much it costs when individual council members and the mayor reach out to Hyde as a resource for them. We're continuing to look deeper at some of the lesser known items taxpayer money was spent on. 12% of that $145,000 was for individual expenses that totals about $13,700. Now, these are items involving a specific council member or the mayor consulting with Hyde. Most of the expenses we grouped into this category are for legal advice that was not specified in the documents we found. Here's the breakdown of the generic legal expense items for each council member from June to October last year. The two who are most frequently mentioned in the expenses for undisclosed legal advice are Councilman Josh Kraft and Mayor Cole Stanley. Mayor Cole Stanley listed 30 times for a total of $9,638. Josh Kraft called 16 times. That totals to $3,160. Two items for Don Tips together only cost $513. There is only one expense for Les Simpson. That was for $610. This item is actually part of Councilman Simpson's concern, and he will explain more about that in just a moment. We don't have any generic legal expenses for Tom Sherlin. 7 expenses do not specify who the council member is who called or reached out.
What about kind of individual use on Hyde, as far as in the documents from June to October, expenses related to, they either say just kind of confer with mayor on pending issues, or confer with mayor, provide necessary legal advice?
For the most part, quite frankly, a lot of those come down to open record requests that we've had the media reaching out for. So when you reach out, it does cost that amount of money. If you're asking, hey, I need to know this document that was sent from Hyde to mayor and conversations from mayor back and forth, he goes through all that and he separates what's attorney-client privilege versus what is public documents. And so some of that is that amount. The other part of that were legal considerations on AEDC. So at the time, we are trying to figure out this expenditure that was made, is this a policy issue that we just need to deal with here, or is this a legal issue? You know, did we have something that crossed the line here because that money ended up in private hands in the form of a company?
We want to note that we have items specific to Public Information Act requests grouped in a category separate from individual council legal expenses. Part of Councilman Simpson's issue with this agreement actually stems from his own individual expense item. Here's what he had to say about it.
I have not been, if you look at the bills and what's gone on with it, I've called George Hyde. Well, actually, I don't think I've ever called George Hyde.
I think you're listed in these maybe twice.
Correct. This is an example of the frustration that I have, is because in a public meeting, I asked George Hyde.
Just to curiosity, what other cities have you done these similar type EDC articles of incorporation for? Do you have some others from some of those cities that you could send for us to? I'd just like to look and see what those look like.
Sure,
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
Because we were hiring him to write articles of incorporation. And there was some very specific language in there that was very restrictive to how our EDC could operate based on what he was suggesting. And he listed, I think, about 4 or 5 different cities that he said applied here. I never received those. And when I asked for them, I eventually received a copy of one articles of incorporation that Mr. Hyde had written. And he had to pay a paralegal $165 an hour for 3.7 hours to find it. And so, and he charged us to find something that he wrote that apparently he didn't have on file. That's why I just wasn't going to call down there every time to run up a bill. And so, and it's a little bit frustrating when you're asking for something and that you would think would be in the file of the attorney who wrote it, and they have to pay a paralegal for nearly 4 hours at $165 an hour to find it. It's very frustrating.
Public information request items make up a separate 13% of the $146,000 spent between June and October. In total, 6 Public Information Act requests have cost the city $19,275. One of them cost nearly $6,000 in taxpayer money. The second cost $4,500. Another $5,000 was spent on 2 requests back in October. One more expense that stood out between June and October is the cost of general legal services in our agreement with Hyde. These expenses are related to preparing and attending city council meetings or other general legal items. In total, we spent $17,789 on that. Several thousand of that are on travel and attendance for city council meetings. One item for Hyde's virtual attendance at a meeting cost $1,100.
Obviously, the travel expenses and stuff does cost a lot of money.
Sure.
You know, but there's some of these to where it's costing us maybe $2,000 or $3,000 for him to attend meetings in person and prepare for them.
Yep.
Is there a way we could reduce that amount of money spent, or is that just kind of the cost of the operating?
You know, I'd say that we've reduced his budget over the months, pretty significantly. So I think we roughly ended up with somewhere around a 30% discount just because we were involving him in multiple issues. So we were getting a volume discount. Then we reduced the travel. So we only brought him here, on the meeting that we really needed him for.
Looking into this morning is in regard to an August 6th transcription. We asked the mayor and all council members about the $2,500 that was spent on the transcription and what it was for. The mayor, Les Simpson, Don Tibbs have all said they don't know what it is. We have not heard an answer back from council members Josh Kraft or Tim Sherlin just yet. We'll continue to be looking at these expense records in the coming weeks and break down how the taxpayer money is being spent. Another thing, what's the difference between our city attorney and the contract that they have with Hyde? Is it a duplication of services? Again, this is a story that we're going to continue to follow. You can see the continuing coverage over on our website, myhighplains.com. Texas House and Senate filed their versions of the state budget. Coming up, we'll take a look at some of the priorities for Texas. Welcome back, friends. Both the Texas House and Senate filed their versions of the state budget last week. This is just the beginning of the budgetary process, but it gives us an idea of how much money certain programs could get. The Speaker of the House called the 2 versions of the budget substantially similar. One of the key items in both proposals was $1 billion for education savings accounts. There was also $6.5 billion for border security and $402 million for new Texas troopers. This is just the beginning of that process, and it's more than likely going to happen where things change, because they do. The 2 proposals will now go to their respective committees in the House and Senate. The Senate Finance Committee already has budget hearings scheduled for the next 3 weeks. We'll wrap things up on Politics Today right after this. Keep it here. Unfortunately, we've run out of time this morning. One more thing before we go. We're continuing to check candidate filings with the city. You can stay up to the latest about those filings over on our website. If you think that you want to run for city council, the information is at myplains.com. I believe the deadline is February 14th, really close to, actually, I think right on the number of Valentine's Day. Plus, I've got a full interview with Mayor Cole Stanley over on our website. Check that out as well.